And today is the 1st of May 2011, and you're listening also to Orion Talk Radio. I'm your host Walter. You can reach me at solvinor1@yahoo.com. You can also call if you want to speak to the rest of the listeners or have a question. The number is 716-213-6816. That's 716-213-6816. Today I had a planning of doing one of two things, and I think it's going to be the Carrol Quigley document PDF that I have here. It's Carrol Quigley was a historian of the Council on Foreign Relations, and he brought out a book where he is laying out things that he learned over there. This is from page 132 of 1090. In the meanwhile, I'll keep an eye on the call-in, and in the breaks, I will check if there's any questions in the chat. So let's get going here. This is the making of the Commonwealth, 1910 to 1926. As soon as South Africa was united in 1910, the kindergarten, that's a German term, that's where your little children go before they go to school to get pre-indoctrinated. But this is probably meaning something else. I think I may have talked about this in the previous, but I can't remember exactly what this kindergarten is. To be honest, it sounds eugenics to me, but I'm not sure. The kindergarten returned to London to try to federate the whole empire by the same method. They were in a hurry to achieve this before the war with Germany, which they believed to be approaching. With Abe Bailey money, they founded the Round Table under Care's, the Lothian's, editorship. Met informal conclaves presided over by Milner to decide the fate of the empire, and recruited new members to their group, chiefly from New College, of which Milner was a fellow. A fellow is also a special term. The new recruits included a historian, F.S. Oliver, Sir Alfred Zimmern. Zimmern is a German name. Sir Reginald Coupland, Lord Lovat, and Waldorf, Lord Astor, the Astor family. They also play an important role. Curtis and others were sent around the world to organize round table groups in the chief British dependencies. Hold on one sec. Control. Yep. Now minus. There we go. Formal conclaves. I mean, for several years, 1910 to 1916, the Round Table groups worked desperately trying to find an acceptable formula for federating the empire. Now, this formula he's talking about for federating the empire, they have them already. There were in the past many more empires, and there's formulas for them. In the previous, I don't know if anybody heard me about this, but in the previous readings I did from Tragedy and Hope, which this is, a history of the world in our time, he also discussed the 7 steps every society goes through when it's coming from nothing, and then it ends all again at the 7th step. So these are formulas that are used, and they already know them. Okay, continuing. 3 books and many articles emerged from these decisions, but gradually it became clear that federation was not acceptable to the English-speaking dependencies. Gradually, it was decided to dissolve all formal bonds between these dependencies, except perhaps allegiance to the crown, and depend on the common outlook of Englishmen to keep the empire together. This involved changing the name British Empire to Commonwealth of Nations. As in the titles of Curtis' book of 1916, giving the chief dependencies, including India and Ireland, their complete independence, but gradually and by free gift rather than under duress, working to bring the United States more closely into the same orientation, and seeking to solidify the intangible links of sentiment by propaganda among financial, educational, and political leaders in each country. Now, they mentioned India here and the British involvement there. And supposedly Gandhi came along at some point, and what he actually did was unify the Indians. And it used to be that what we now know as India, they were all monarchies. There were lots of kings there, hundreds of them. And now India is united. So that was really the goal of Gandhi. He was working for the New World Order. There is no such thing as freedom for the Indian people, not as there is for anybody in this mad world. Continuing. I've seen, where was I? No, lost where. I think it was here, yes. Efforts to bring the dependencies into a closer relationship with the mother country were by no means new in 1910, nor were they supported only by Rhodes' Milner Group. Cecil Rhodes and the Milner Group. Milner Group is a banking family. Nevertheless, the actions of this group were all pervasive. The poor military performance of British forces during the Boer War led to the creation of a commission to investigate the South African War, with Lord Asher as chairman, 1903. Among other items, this commission recommended creation of Permanent Committee of Imperial Defense. Oops. Asher became unofficial chairman of this committee, holding the position for the rest of his life, which was 1905 to 1930. So there is a committee of imperial defense. What the heck? He was able to establish an imperial general staff in 1907 and to get a complete reorganization of the military forces of New Zealand, Australia and South Africa, so that they could be incorporated into the imperial forces in an emergency, 1909 to 1912. On the committee itself, he created an able secretariat which cooperated loyally with the Rhodes Milner Group thereafter. These men included Sir Maurice Hankey and Sir Ernest Swinton, who invented the tank in 1915. When, in 1916 to 1917, Milner and Asher persuaded the cabinet to create a secretariat for the first time, the task was largely given to this secretariat. So I guess I'll just continue here with this Carrol Quigley, Tragedy and Hope. Thus, Hankey was secretary to the committee for 30 years, to the cabinet for 22 years, clerk to the Privy Council for 15 years. He was a busy man, huh? Secretary General of the 5 imperial conferences held between 1921 and 1937. Secretary to the British delegation to almost every important international conference held between the Versailles Conference of 1919 and the Lausanne Conference of 1932, and one of the leading advisors to the conservative governments after 1939. Until 1907, the overseas portions of the empire, except India, it says here, communicated with the imperial government through the Secretary of State for Colonies. To supplement this relationship, conferences of the Prime Minister of the self-governing colonies were held in London to discuss common problems in 1887, 1897, 1902, 07, 11, 1917, and 18. Busy people. In 1907, it was decided to hold such conferences every 4 years, to call the self-governing colonies dominions, and to bypass the colonial secretary by establishing a new dominion department. Ruskin's influence, among others, could be seen in the emphasis of the Imperial Conference of 1911, that the empire rested on a triple foundation. These terms, by the way, that are used all the time here, they remind me of Star Wars. You know, imperial and empire and colonial and dominion and things like that. They were quite easy to understand words. Nowadays, it's agenda for sustainable development. It all sounds so nice, you know. Yeah. Continuing. The Imperial Conference of 1911, that the empire rested on a triple foundation of 1, rule of law, 2, local autonomy, and 3, trusteeship of the interests and fortunes of those fellow subjects who had not yet attained self-government. And there's a call coming in. You're welcome to Micro 1650 AM.
Oh, yes, sir. My name is Jeff, calling from Chelsea, Massachusetts. How's your week?
How are you doing, Jeff?
No, I'm doing just fine. Well, as far as sustainable development is concerned, well, the name of the game is depopulation.
Yeah.
When the New World Order finally does arrive and you have a one world leader, it's going to be, okay, we're going to thin the herd out by 75%. And we're going to start off with Africa. We're going to start off with Latin America, all those useless eaters. And then after that...
Jeff, when you hear, for instance, about these vaccination programs that they have in Africa that you just mentioned,
yes,
I see them failing. What do you see? Do you see them, everybody's dropping dead, or do you see people running away in the mountains because they know the vaccines are hurt?
Oh, the Africans know that the vaccines are really bad. I mean, a lot of Americans don't realize this, but Americans are actually dumber than the people in Africa when it comes to this stuff.
When it comes to vaccines, yeah.
Yeah. Oh yes, we'll bend over and take vaccines. We'll take fluoride. We'll do whatever we're told to maintain our goodies. But people over there, they have something way more powerful, and that's the word on the street. And when you see a village drop dead in Africa, I mean, especially Muslims, they know what's going on, and Muslims are already suspicious of the Western powers and so forth. So they're not going to take anything. I mean, Muslims are like the last standout to the New World Order, and I don't care for Islam too much, but I got to give credit to where credit's due. The Muslims are very streetwise, and I'm talking about the Muslim countries, and they know what's going on.
Mm-hmm. I see this depopulation agenda also going on. It's happening on so many levels that I don't think it will be like they're going to drop some bombs and then lots of people are going to be dead. I think they'll just let us die, you know?
Oh yes. What I believe the New World Order is, they're going to let the old, especially in this country, America, they're going to let the people 60, 40 and over just die. And then when that generation is gone, then the young people, it's going to be a mop-up operation. I mean, America's finished as a country, especially the East Coast. I mean, it really is. And Europe's finished, too, in its own way. And they're just waiting until that old population dies off, and then, like I said, it's a mop-up operation. I mean, where you see the troops on the streets just exterminate Americans.
You really think so? No, I doubt that. I think that the youth is so very well indoctrinated that they will abide by any rules that the government is putting upon them.
Oh no! I think you're right. But what I mean by troops on the streets is the youth will say, "There's the right winger. There's the anti-Muslim. There's the anti-Semite. There's the anti-whomever the government says." There's a person who's pro-Israel. Whatever the government says, the youth will be so dumbed down. They'll point to the thought criminal and say, "There he is, good written." As the people in the black uniforms drag the distance through the streets, the youth will be cheering and waving while they're eating pizza and in fornication and drinking booze and watching sports.
Yeah,
that's how it's going to end in America.
Yeah, we see some of that already happening. Yeah. So what are we going to do about it, Jeff?
I'm taking personal steps. I mean, I used to do a lot of activist type of work. I used to be a member of the John Birch Society, so I used to do this type of stuff. Right now, right now at this stage in my life, I realize that in my area, Massachusetts, the country, my area is already sunk. So what I'm doing is I'm just taking steps, and I plan on getting out of the big city. That's my main program, because people in this area will not listen. They are addicted to their hack jobs and so forth. And I mean, I really, I'm going to close with this. I believe that the next shoe to drop is you're going to see a bunch of 9/11s happen in my country. When that happens, it's over.
You can call in 716-213-6816, as Jeff just did. And in the previous segment, he mentioned the John Birch Society, and I was wondering if Jeff could tell a little bit more about that, and maybe say something about the people he met there, anything. Jeff, what can you tell me about the John Birch Society?
Well, roughly speaking, when it comes to mainstream groups, it is one of the better groups out there. I mean, I've met a lot of great people with the John Birch Society. They have a lot of good literature. The strong point of the Birchers is the literature. I mean, they have the Federalist Papers. I mean, they are very difficult. They have books that are very difficult to get. I mean, that's what they do. They collect books that are difficult to get. Stuff that if they didn't get these books would be non-existent practically in America. And and you know what? The coordinator is a good friend of mine. He's a good guy, and you have lots of good people in the Birchers. But there's a caveat: when a society, when any group gets too big, it's likely to get infiltrated. I mean, I've heard people on Oracle and other people criticize the Birchers and so forth, but my feelings are very mixed because even Alex Jones, when a host gets too big, he or she can become compromised. Because see, whomever pays them, whomever pays the fiddler gets to choose the tune. That's why myself, I'm not part of any group or any society. Although I am affiliated with the American First Party. They're very good, but you know what? I'm preparing to go underground. I think the country's gone. I think it's too late, and people in America and Europe better be prepared to go underground, because once they take these stations off the internet, and once you have these 9/11s, it's over. I mean, it's literally over, and you'll see foreign troops come in and start genociding the people, basically, and for all these years, I fought to prevent that from happening, but it's too late. And on that note, I'll let you go. To have a good weekend.
Okay, well, thanks for the call, Jeff. Well, first of all, I would like to say that it's never too late. I don't think I would be making this radio if I think it was too late. As we are discussing in this Carrol and Quigley, Tragedy and Hope, in 1910, we were already lost, you know. So, if you put it on a chessboard, the situation, we are lost. We are standing in a bad position, so to speak. It's like checkmate in 6 move or something, you know. But that doesn't mean that we have to just throw away our desire. It is to counter this disinformation and to counter this making of a new world empire, so to speak. And I think people have been doing this for much longer time, like, for instance, Bill Cooper. He had a very large audience, and I don't think there is no hope left, so to speak, although I don't like to use the word hope. It's an unhuman society that we live in today, and I think that if we wake up enough people to the fact that it is unhuman, what's going on, and that we shouldn't let these psychopaths run our lives, then I don't think we need a high percentage of people that are waking up or awake, and the things may change for the better. I think that's the reason why I make radio anyway. It's to wake and shake people up. Now about this John Birch Society, with all these groups, like for instance also the Greenpeace group. You all know them, Greenpeace. I had a founding member of Greenpeace on my radio show. His name was Lord Christopher Monckton. Most of you probably also know him. And he told me that his creation was hijacked by the communists, and he left. So you see that all these well-known mainstream media organizations, they are either indeed, as Jeff said, hijacked, or even set up for you to join. It's called controlled opposition. So you have to be very careful with joining groups. If you want to do something like that, maybe start your own group. And then be very careful that you don't get infiltrated. You have to be awake to make sure that you don't get infiltrated. You have to know what tactics they use to infiltrate you. And this is not a conspiracy subject or something. I mean, take a look at Cass Sunstein, you know, close friend of Obama, who wrote a paper about infiltrating not only groups, but even chat rooms, okay, to disturb radio broadcasts. They have people paid to do work for disinformation and disruption and misleading and all that kind of stuff. So you have to be very aware and make sure that you have weapons ready to counter any nonsense that is being brought forth. So be very careful with groups. Okay, gonna continue here with Carrol Quigley. We were, I guess, here. The conference of 1915 could not be held because of the war. But as soon as Milner became one of the 4 members of the War Cabinet in 1915, you see again they used the normal terms. It's a war cabinet. Okay, it's about war. Today it's called Department of Defense, for instance. What do you mean, defense? It's offense. You should call it Department of Offense. It's all the neuro-linguistic talk that is being used to influence how you think. Okay, continuing. So the War Cabinet in 1915, his influence began to be felt everywhere. We have mentioned that he established a cabinet secretariat in 1916-1917 consisting of 2 protégés of Escher, Hankey and Swinton, and 2 of his own, his secretaries Leopold Emery and W.G.A. Ormsby Gore, later Lord Harlech. At the same time, he gave the Prime Minister, Lloyd George, a secretariat from the Round Table, consisting of Kerr, Lothian, Grigg, Lord Altrincham, W.G.S. Adams, Fellow of All Souls College. Gee, what the heck is that? And by the way, these terms like Round Table and Fellow of All Souls College are pointing to the fact that secret society is also playing a very big role here. Okay, and then also Esther is playing a role at the end of the sentence here. Continuing, he created an imperial war cabinet by adding Dominion Prime Minister, particularly Smuts, to the United Kingdom War Cabinet. He also called the imperial conferences of 1917 and 1918 and invited the Dominions to establish resident ministers in London. I'm going to continue here. As the war drew to a close in 1918, Milner took the office of Colonia Secretary with Emery as his assistant, negotiated an agreement providing independence for Egypt. An independence for Egypt. This, I don't know exactly at what stage the culture is in at this point, but believe me, they don't want any independent countries. They want a new world government with no sovereignty for any country. So this, I think this agreement providing independence for Egypt was for the outside world. This is the exoteric. I think, this is all conjecture of course, but I think that behind that independence is a secret control. Continuing, set up a new self-government constituting in Malta, sent Curtis to India, where he drew up the chief provisions of the Government of India Act of 1919. Yeah, I should say, with this Egypt thing and independence, and that it's exoteric, it's for the outside world. They also created all these countries so that they could be set up against each other. It's about dividing people and creating wars. It's also a reason for letting the people think that you are independent and that you are sovereign. Continuing, appointed Curtis to the post of advisor on Irish affairs, where he played an important role in granting Dominion status to Southern Ireland in 1921. Gave Canada permission to establish separate diplomatic relations with the United States. The First Minister began being the son-in-law of Milner's closest collaborator on the Rhodes Trust. So you see that family ties also play an important role. And called the Imperial Conference of 1921. Now, it also mentioned here Southern Ireland. And Northern Ireland is also there, of course. And there's a group of people I'm not sure if it's southern or northern Ireland. I think north. But they had a war in 1916, which the Irish claimed their independence. And unfortunately, though, you will find that there is no more independence left of Ireland. This can be shown by what happened about, 4 or 5 weeks ago. There was a court case going on, and what happened was that the sovereign people of Ireland, they made an arrest on the judge, because the judge has no power to be able to give a ruling, as they are sovereign people. Okay, that was the claim they made, which may have been valid in 1917 or 18 or 19. But nowadays, that doesn't go anymore. The police comes and arrests these sovereign citizens. Okay, that's what's happening. The judge is set free. So you see, it doesn't work like that in reality. Continuing. Gave Canada permission to establish separate diplomatic relations with the United States. I already read that. During this decade, 1919-1929, the Rhodes-Milner Group gave the chief impetus towards transforming the British Empire into the Commonwealth of Nations and launching India on the road to responsible self-government. Responsible self-government. Like, if they're not responsible according to what the British think, then they're gonna come in and destroy their self-government. That's double think. The creation of the roundtable groups by Milner's kindergarten in 1909-1913 opened a new day in both these fields, although the whole group was so secretive that even today, many close students of the subject are not aware of its significance. These men had formed their intellectual growth at Oxford, on Pericles' funeral oration as described in a book by a member of the group, Sir Alfred Zimmern's The Greek Commonwealth, 1911, on Edmund Burke's On Consolation with America, on Sir J.B. Seeley's Growth of British Policy, on A.V. Dicey's The Law and Custom of the Constitution, and on the New Testament's Sermon of the Mount. The last was especially influential on Lionel Curtis. He had a fanatical conviction that with the proper spirit and the proper organization, local self-government and federalism, that's what they mean with proper spirit and proper organization, the kingdom of God could be established on earth. Wow. What a nutcase. He was sure that if people were trusted just a bit beyond what they deserve, look at the tone of this, they would respond by proving worthy of such trust. As he wrote in The Problem of Commonwealth, 1916, if political power is granted to groups before they are fit, they will tend to rise to the need. This was the spirit which Milner Group tried to use toward the Boers in 1902-1910. The Boers, by the way, is a Dutch word. It means farmer. Toward India in 1910-1947 and, unfortunately, toward Hitler in 1933-1939. This point of view was reflected in Curtis's 3 volumes on world history, published as Civitas Dei in 1938. In case of Hitler at least, these high ideals led to disaster. This seems also to be the case in South Africa. Whether this group succeeded in transforming the British Empire into a Commonwealth of Nations, or merely succeeded in destroying the British Empire is not yet clear, but one seems as likely as the other. Well, this Commonwealth of Nations, that's to me comes across as communism. So I don't think it's not that unclear yet, Mr. Carrol Quigley. That these ideas were not solely those of Curtis, but were held by the group as a whole will be clear to all who study it. When Lord Lothian died in Washington in 1940, Curtis published a volume of his speeches and included the obituary which Grigg had written for the Round Table. Of Lothian this said, he held that men should strive to build the kingdom of heaven here upon this earth. And, I'm going to stop here. This building a kingdom of heaven on earth, this is also done literally. For instance, with the 3 pyramids at Giza. They represent the belt of Orion. And you will find that if you go away from those 3 pyramids in north and south and east and west, you will find structures of pyramids at the other star points of the hunter. Okay? So that's also a way in which they bring heaven to earth. Continuing. And that the leadership in that task must fall first and foremost upon the English-speaking peoples. Other attitudes of this influential group can be gathered from some quotations from 4 books published by Curtis in 1916 to 1920. The rule of law, as contrasted with the rule of an individual, is the distinguishing mark of the Commonwealth. Well, I'm going to read this in my own words. And then it says, the legal positivism is against the individual in this communism. That's what I read when it says the rule of law as contrasted with the rule of an individual is the distinguishing mark of the Commonwealth. They will try and destroy everything that is natural to us. And I'm going to keep an eye on the call board while I continue with this tragedy and hope. In despotisms, governments rests on the authority of the ruler, of the invisible and uncontrollable power behind him. In a commonwealth rulers derive their authority from the law, and the law from a public opinion which is competent to change it. The idea that the principle of commonwealth implies universal suffrage betrays an ignorance of its real nature. That principle simply means that governments rests on the duty of the citizens to each other and is to be vested in those who are capable of setting public interests before their own. Okay, I may just be a little radical here, but what is he talking about duties of citizens to each other? Who is telling us people that we have duties? Who is telling us that? Who is in place, who is in such position that they can tell that we have duties? An unborn baby is burdened with duties. Okay, that's not normal in my opinion. There is not one living being born on this earth, except humans, that apparently have duties. That's ridiculous. You're supposed to be free. And if you want to survive, of course, you have to do some things, but those are not considered duties in my opinion. So, continuing, the task of preparing for freedom, the races which cannot as yet govern themselves, is the supreme duty of those who can. Oh my God! This is the same argument that queens and kings use. The task of preparing for freedom, the races which cannot as yet govern themselves. Excuse me, who are you to decide, or who is anyone to decide, that a race cannot govern themselves? And therefore it is your supreme duty to do it for them? That's rubbish. Continuing, it is the spiritual end for which the Commonwealth exists. A material order is nothing except as a means to it. By the way, order is a military term. The peoples of India and Egypt, no less than those of the British Isles and Dominions, must be gradually schooled in the management of their national affairs. What he is meaning here as a gradually schooled in the management of national affairs is that they abide by the rules that are laid down from above. The whole effect of the war of 1914-1918 has been to bring movements long gathering to a sudden head. Companionship in arms has fanned long smoldering resentments against the presumption that Europeans are destined to dominate the rest of the world. That's rubbish also. Pervading, I think the word is pervading, not sure. The pervading powers move from place to place. At the moment, they are moving to Dubai, China, India. That's where they're moving now. And Europeans, which can also be heard as European, have been used just as any other people have been used. Continuing, in every part of Asia and Africa, it is bursting into flames. Personally, I regard this challenge to the long unquestioned claim of the white man to dominate the world as inevitable and wholesome, especially to ourselves. Excuse me? Huh. Is there such a claim? Who claimed that? I don't know. Personally, I regard this challenge to the long, unquestioned claim of the white man to dominate the world as inevitable and wholesome, especially to ourselves. Ha! The world is in the throes which precede creation or death. Our whole race has outgrown the merely national state, and as surely as day follows night, or night the day, will pass either to a commonwealth of nations or else to an empire of slaves. And the issue of these agonies rests with us. Yeah. Well, I don't know about this white race. I mean, I'm white myself, or pink is the better explanation. But I think that in the ancient past, and I mean like long ago, more than a couple of thousand years, I don't know exactly how long, but there's not much of this pink people, or whites as you would call them, walking around on this earth. There's more yellow people, for instance, okay? There's more brown people too. And I don't care much about that. I mean, it doesn't matter to me what color skin you have. I mean, I think we're all human, so. But the fact that there's not many of the whites around may have been an effect of a war, okay? There's myths going around of ancient times that whole races were obliterated, were dealt with, were assassinated. and that in ancient times there were more colors than we have today. I don't remember exactly because it was so long ago that I heard this, but there was talk of a blue race, also a blue-skinned race, but they seem to have gone. Okay, and this is what may have happened in the past to the white people as well, which is why there's not so many of them. And I don't, what he's talking about here, this whites being destined to rule the world, may have been the reason why we are so small now. You know, this may not have been the first attempt of these whites to control everything. And they had to be dealt with in the past. So, you know, that may be a reason for not having as many as whites. Okay? So, let's see, where were we? Going to continue here. Another resolution called for full representation for India in future imperial conferences. This was done in 1918. At this second wartime imperial conference, it was resolved that prime ministers of dominions could communicate directly with the prime minister of the United Kingdom, and that each dominion and India could establish resident ministers in London. So, where were we? We were at page 135 of the Carrol Quigley Tragedy and Hope. During these years, 1917, 1918, a declaration was drawn up establishing complete independence for the dominions except for allegiance to the crown. What kind of independence is that? You know, you can be independent, but you still got to listen to what the Queen says. That doesn't make any sense. This was not issued until 1926. Instead, on July 9th, 1919, Milner issued an official statement which said, "The United Kingdom and the Dominions are partner nations, not yet indeed of equal power, but for good and all of equal status. The only possibility of a continuance of the British Empire is on the basis of absolute, out-and-out equal partnership between the United Kingdoms and the Dominions." I say that without any kind of reservation whatsoever. This point of view was restated in the so-called Balfour Declaration of 1926 and was enacted into law as a Statute of Westminster 1931. Now, there's another Balfour Declaration which dates 1917. I hope he mentions it in a later point. B.K. Long of the South African Roundtable Group was the colonial editor of the Times in 1913-1921 and editor of the Rhodes paper, the Cape Times. The Times, all those Times, you got the India Times and the Dutch, you have the Times, it's called the Tijd. And all of these countries have those Times, okay? That's not a coincidence that they all have the same name. In South Africa, 1922-1935, that was Rhodes paper and the Cape Times, tells us that the provisions of the declarations of 1926 were agreed on in 1917 during the Imperial Conference convoked by Milner. They were formulated by John W. Dafoe, editor of the Winnipeg Free Press for 43 years and the most influential journalist in Canada for much of that period. Dafoe persuaded the Canadian Prime Minister, Sir Robert Borden, to accept his idea and then brought in Long and Dawson, editor of the Times. Dawson negotiated the agreement with Milner, Smuts and others. Although Australia and New Zealand were far from satisfied, the influence of Canada and of South Africa carried the agreement. 9 years later, it was issued under Balfour's name at a conference convoked by Ameri. Now he's going into East Africa, 1910-1931. In the dependent empire, especially in tropical Africa, north of the Zambezi River. Okay, what is this? In the dependent empire. Okay, that doesn't make any sense to me at all. If you're an empire, you're independent. So what's this? Doesn't make any sense. In the dependent empire, especially in tropical Africa north of the Zambezi River, the Rhodes-Milner Group was unable to achieve most of its desires, but was able to win wide publicity for them, especially for its views on native questions. It dominated the colonial office in London, at least for the decade 1919-1929. There, Milner was Secretary of State in 1919-1922 and Emery in 1924-29. While the post of Parliamentary Undersecretary was held by 3 members of the group for most of the decade. Publicity for their views on civilizing the natives and training them for eventual self-government received wide dissemination. Okay, I understand also where this civilizing of natives is coming from. That's because they are Darwinists. And they see these other people as monkeys. Okay, continuing. Not only by official sources, but also by the academic, scholarly, and journalistic organizations they dominated. As examples of this, we might mention the writings of Coupland, Haley, Curtis, Crick, Emery, and Lothian. All round-tablers. In 1938, Lord Haley edited a gigantic volume of 1,837 pages called An African Survey. This work was first suggested by Smuts at Rhodes House, Oxford, in 1929. Had a foreword by Lothian and an editorial board of Lothian, Haley, Coupland, Curtis, and others. It remained the greatest single book on modern Africa. These people and others, through the Times, the Round Table, the Observer, Chatham House, and other conduits, became the chief source of ideas on colonial problems of the English-speaking world. By the way, Chatham House is apparently also the address of the Royal Institute of International Affairs. In the course of the 1920s, the Round Table program for East Africa was paralyzed by a debate on the priority which should be given to the 3 aspects of groups' projects for a Negro dominion north of the Zambezi. The 3 parts were: 1. Native rights. Here's a thing that bugs me. They are talking here about native rights. So who are they to give rights to anybody else? What position do these people think they have? 2, closer union. That's a nice term. Today it's called closer ties. But of course, it all leads to a big union, all these closer ties. And 3, an international trusteeship. Generally, the group gave priority to closer union. Federation of Kenya with Uganda and Tanganyika. But the ambiguity of their ideas on native rights made it possible for Dr. Joseph H. Altman, spokesman for the organized non-conformist missionary groups, to organize a successful opposition movement to Federation of East Africa. In this effort, Oldham found a powerful ally in Lord Lugard, a considerable support from other informed persons, including Marguerite Perham. This is called controlled opposition. The Round Tablers, who had no first-hand knowledge of native life or even of tropical Africa, were devoted supporters of the English way of life and could see no greater benefit conferred on natives than to help them to move in that direction. This, however, would inevitably destroy the tribal organization of life, as well as the native system of land tenure, which were generally based on tribal holding of land. The white settlers were eager to see these things disappear, since they generally wished to bring their native labor force and African lands into the commercial market. Yeah, he could have just as well said use them as slaves. Oldham and Lugard opposed this, since they felt it would lead to white ownership of large tracts of land on which detribalized and demoralized natives would subsist on wage slaves. Moreover, to Lugard, economy and colonial administrations required that natives be governed under his system of indirect rule, through tribal chiefs. Closer union became a controversial target in this dispute because it involved a gradual increase of local self-government, which would lead to a greater degree of white settler rule. Well, again, this white stuff. I mean, haven't I been indoctrinated enough in school about how bad the whites are? My God. The opposition to closer union in East Africa was successful in holding up this project in spite of the Round Table domination of the Colonial Office, chiefly because of Prime Minister Baldwin's refusal to move quickly. This delayed change under the Labour government took over in 1929, and this pro-native, non-conformist, especially Quaker influence was stronger. The trusteeship issue came into this controversy because Britain was bound as a mandate power to maintain native rights in Tanganyika, something like that, to the satisfaction of the Mandates Commission of the League of Nations. Yeah, this League of Nations he's mentioning here was set up after the First World War with the same idea as the United Nations is today. And of course the idea never works, which is why you see that after the creation of the United Nations, there's not less war, but more. This placed a major obstacle in the path of Round Table efforts to join Tanganyika with Kenya and Uganda into a Negro dominion, which would be under quite a different kind of trusteeship of the African colonial power. Farther south, in the Rhodesia and Nyasaland, the Round Table obsession with federation did not meet this obstacle. And that area was eventually federated over native protests in 1953. By the way, Rhodesia is of course from Rhodes. But this creation, the Central African Federation, broke up again in 1964. Okay, so the Central African Federation, it broke up in 1964, but now we have the African Union. Strangely enough, the League of Nations mandate system, which became such an obstacle to the Round Table plans, was largely a creation of the Round Table itself. Well, that's not so strange, Mr. Quigley. That's how you set up controlled opposition. The Milner Group used the defeat of Germany in 1918 as an opportunity to impose an international obligation on certain powers to treat the natives fairly in the regions taken from Germany. This opportunity was of great significance because just at that time the earlier impetus in this direction arising from missionaries was beginning to weaken as a consequence of the general weakening of religious feeling in European culture. The chief problem in East Africa arose from the position of the white settlers of Kenya, Although this colony rests directly on the equator, its interior highlands, 4,000 to 10,000 feet up, were well adapted to white settlement and to European agriculture methods. The situation was dangerous by 1920 and grew steadily worse as the years passed, until by 1950 Kenya had the most critical native problem in Africa. It differed from South Africa in that it lacked self-government, rich mines, or a divided white population. But it had many common problems, such as overcrowded native reserves, soil erosion, and discontented and detribalized blacks working for low wages on lands owned by whites. It had about 2 million blacks and only 3,000 whites in 1910. 40 years later, it had about 4 million blacks, 100,000 Indians, 24,000 Arabs, and only 30,000 whites, of which 40% were government employees. But what the whites lacked in numbers, they made up in determination. Excuse me? You call that determination? It's domination. The healthful highlands were reserved for white ownership as early as 1908, although they were not delimited and guaranteed until 1939. They were organized as very large, mostly undeveloped farms, of which there were only 2,000, covering 10,000 square miles in 1940. That is so much land, it's unbelievable. You could feed a whole of 10,000 square miles, my God. That's Netherlands about. Or let me check. 100, yeah, something like that. You know, you could feed the whole of Europe with that mass land. And they're talking about land erosion in previous talk here. But this land erosion was not something we were used to. I mean, for instance, the older cultures, they also grew their food on their lands, and they also knew that it takes energy from the land. But they had a way of replenishing that without using machines that... how do you call that? Inject cow dung into the land, which is a very bad way of replenishing your soil. There's a better way, and the old people that live closer to nature, they knew about that, and I don't know why. The Africans lost it somehow, because I'm sure they had the knowledge as well as how to treat their land so that they would not break the land down so that it's useless in the end. It has to do with survival, okay? So I'm going to assume that we knew how to survive. We knew how to survive for thousands and thousands of years. Millions of years, perhaps, if you want to believe some of the mythology out there. So we're going to continue. He's talking about land, farms. It says here, many of these farms were of more than 30,000 acres and had been obtained from the government, either by purchase or on a very long 999-year lease for only nominal cost. Rent about 2 cents per year per acre. Okay, that's a giveaway. That's already a sign that you can see that governments and corporations are working together. It's called fascism. The native reserves amounted to about 50,000 square miles of generally poorer land, or 5 times as much land for the blacks, although they had at least 150 times as many people. The Indians, chiefly in commerce and crafts, were so industrious that they gradually came to own most of the commercial areas in both in the towns and in the native reserves. Now, before I forget, before the break I mentioned this about Celtic salt, and I'll just quickly teach you how to use that for your land. If you have sandy land, you can use it up to 5 times, 6 times per year, if you want. If you have clayey ground, you can use it 2 times a year. So here's what you do. You get yourself some Celtic salt, which has 85 minerals in it, which is very useful for any plant. Then you get a little jar, like a jam jar or whatever. You fill that up with 1/3 of Celtic salt and 2/3 of water. And then you put the top on it, you shake it until the salt is gone. Now you have a solution of what they call sol, L-O-L, S-O-L, means sun. That you put in a refrigerator, okay? And if you want to give that to your land, here's what you do. You get spraying or a gieter. What do you call that in English? Something you water your land with. Usually you carry it in your hand from the tap. Okay, it's about 12 liters or 15 liters that goes in those gieters. I don't know what you call them in English, lol. And so what you do is you fill up your gieter and you put about 2 spoons. So not teaspoons, but 2 spoons of water in about 12 to 15 liters of water. And that you give on your land as you would water it normally. If you were, like you say, oh, my plants look thirsty today, I'm going to give them some water. It's the same amount of water that you give. Just make sure you give it not too much, because, of course, it's salt, and you can destroy your land with salt, so be careful. You can also drink it, and you take the little same jar with your your solution, and you take 1 teaspoon of that into a glass of water, a glass of clean water, and you can also drink that. There's 85 minerals in there, which your body will use to keep you healthy. You can drink that at least once a day. You will find that for most people, I think this will go, because it was so at my experience also. You will find that your body will start asking for it by itself. So if you feel the need to drink some more, you take another little teaspoon in a glass of water, you mix that and you drink that up. That's good for you. Okay, that about your land and how to fertilize it, and your body as well. You can use Celtic salt for that. Continuing, I'm saying continuing, but I see about a caller coming in here. Hello, who are you calling from?
My name is Robert Siemens, and I'm calling from Edmond, Oklahoma.
Hi, Robert. Welcome to the show.
Actually, I was calling in. I'm supposed to be interviewed by Maggie.
Yeah, okay. That should be cool. Maggie is in about 12 minutes. You can reach her, I think.
Okay. Should I just call back then?
Yeah, the best thing for you to do would be to call back. It's 54 now, so that's 12, 13 minutes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, and I'll be hearing you on the radio then.
Okay, good. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye. Okay. Well done. So, let's continue. The 2 great subjects of controversy in Kenya were concerned with the supply of labor and the problem of self-government. Didn't I already read that? Let's see. I'm getting another message here. Okay. Ta-da. I'm sorry, people. Somebody's asking me for a link, and I'm gonna reply. Yeah. Now let me find out where I was. Increased pressure. Yeah, I guess that's where I was. Gonna start this right here. The two great subjects of controversy in Kenya were concerned with the supply of labor and the problem of self-government. And again, who are they to decide that these people have a problem of self-government? It's only because they look upon them as monkeys. Although less agitated problems like agricultural technology, sanitation and education were of vital significance. The whites tried to increase the pressure on natives to work on white farms rather than to seek to make a living on their own lands within the reserves by forcing them to pay taxes in cash, by curtailing the size or quality of the reserves, by restricting improvements in native agricultural techniques. What a sneakers, huh? And by personal and political pressure and compulsion. Getting distracted here. I'll answer that later. The effort to use political compulsion reached a peak in 1919 and was stopped by Milner. Although this group, like Rhodes in South Africa, was eager to make natives more industrious and more ambitious by any kind of social, educational or economic pressures. The settlers encouraged natives to live off the reserves in various ways. For example, by permitting them to settle as squatters on white estates in return for at least 180 clays of work a year at the usual low wage rates. Yeah, just slavery. Why don't you just say it? To help both black and white farmers, not only in Kenya, but throughout the world. Milner created, as a research organization, an Imperial College of Tropical Agriculture at Trinidad in 1919. As a consequence of various pressures, which we have mentioned, notably the need to pay taxes, which averaged perhaps 1 month's wage a year and, in the aggregate, took from the natives a larger sum than that realized from the sale of native products. The percentage of adult males working off the reservations increased from about 35% in 1925 to over 80% in 1940.